does he take sugar in his tea? You get that thing going on, which takes away independence, right? And I'm like, well, we don't get that.
So today's guest is Dan Archer from Visiting Angels. Welcome, Dan.
Hi.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Thank you for joining us today.
Quite all right, no problem at all.
So you've got quite a story to tell. Yes, you have.
Okay.
Let's start. How did you set up Visiting Angels?
Okay. Well, I've always said about the sector that I'm involved in that people don't know about care unless they've had care for a family member or they work in the sector. And that's kind of as it was for me, really. My history's in franchising. I've been in franchising since the late 90s. And then my mum's mum needed some care, my nan. I mean, nan, she was more than just my mum's mum. My dad was pretty absent when we were kids, so my mum worked full time. And my nan basically raised me, my brother and my sister. So, yeah, she lived with arthritis for about 15 years, my nan did. Started in her hands and her wrists, and then she got it in her spine. Because of that, she was starting to have a risk of falls. So social worker recommended we get a care provider come in.
Is that where someone comes and visits their property? And helps?
So just an assessment, really. So it was through the doctor's surgery. And the social worker's like, look, there's a risk that she might get hurt here, basically. So you need to have someone coming in the mornings, basically. So we took a recommendation on a care provider, and they said they did half our visits, so we didn't question it. We said we wanted someone at 8 a.m. and 9 p.m, because that's when my nan got up and went to bed.
Yeah.
And in the first 8 weeks, we had 15 different people come.
Oh, wow.
Constant revolving door of face after new face after new face. And I'm from Sheffield. My nan was from Sheffield as well. I always say my nan had a northern sense of humour about it. She said she knew she was getting care when the blue tabard showed up. Because she never knew the people, because the people were changing all the time. Right? She just sort of, the uniform meant care. And
you think as well, when someone's going through and they need the help, like they just want someone that they can get used to, they build that bond with.
Familiarity, just someone who knows where stuff is, even just a really simple thing like, where is the jam in the cupboard? What does someone have for breakfast typically, So we weren't getting that. So we complained about it, and I'm pretty good at complaining. My mum's even better than I am, actually. My mum was a school teacher for 35 years, my mum. She's the bossiest lady on planet. But between us, we couldn't get that fixed. And long story short, after a missed visit one morning, my nan had a fall, was taken to hospital and never came home. So that was sort of my exposure to social care, was that experience, which just wasn't great, basically. And a little while after that, through franchising, I was speaking at a conference in Telford, talking to a room full of people about Twitter, as it was called then, because back in 2011,
is this when you were in the marketing?
I was just involved in the franchise association, and got a chance to speak, and I did a double header with a guy who was a lawyer from Manchester about the potential problems that could come from social media, and also how you might harness it well and stuff like that. And one of the people that saw me speak was a chap called Trevor Brocklebank, and he was the founder of Home Instead in the UK. So I sort of went in about a year. I went from knowing nothing about the sector to seeing the very worst of it, and then to working for Home Instead, who were one of the biggest providers in the market, actually biggest provider in the world. That was me getting into the care sector. I mean, directly prior to starting Visiting Angels, I was running a European business, UK managing director for a business called ProMedica 24, which is a live-in care provider. And our business model was we had 52 recruitment offices in 5 European countries, finding European care workers and bringing them to the UK.
So did you get into all of this through, did you want to do this because of what you've seen with your nan? Is that why you got into care?
I absolutely. When I spoke to Home Instead, everything they described was the complete opposite to what we'd seen as a family. I absolutely could see categorically they provided a better service. I came away from that conversation thinking, if we'd had Home Instead looking after my nan, she'd probably still be with us, because I could see that they provided so much better service. You know what I mean? So there was a desire to want to get involved to try and make sure another family didn't face what we faced, basically. But the thing with the European company was I was running that in April 2016 when we voted for Brexit. I say we, I didn't. I'm not sure. I'd ask you the Brexit.
Are you sure,
question.
Dan?
I've not met anybody else that's prepared to admit to it, to be honest with you. Anyway, by the by, I'll get some Brexit hate on.
Are we going back into it?
No, I don't know about that. The thing is, like, I woke up that morning and like the UK had said we don't want to be involved in Europe anymore. And the business I was running was dependent on people moving out of Europe into the UK. So I'm having my cornflakes that morning thinking, this is probably not the best news. Do you know what I mean? And pretty quickly we could see that people didn't want to come in the number that they used to.
Yeah.
So I limped along until February 2017 and I resigned. And then when you run a big company and you resign, they stick you on gardening leave. So I had 6 months of gardening and decorating and getting under my wife's feet before my Mrs. Lucy said, just get out of the house and go and do something to be gainfully employed. And I started then doing the research on what became Visiting Angels, basically. Right. So started the business planning, looked at the market in building detail. I mean, I've been involved in it for a few years, but I'd not looked at it from a perspective of my company and what I wanted to do with it, basically.
So you then just decided that you wanted to set something up yourself and really just put a spin on it?
I could see a combination of the lived experience that I'd had of all of the problems we had with my nan were down to staff turnover. There's lots of faces coming, we're all staff turnover problems. And I'm like, right, so the problem here is people.
Yeah.
Everybody, when I was working with Home Instead, the biggest barrier to the growth of a home care business was, can you find enough great people to be carers, And then when you're running a European company and Brexit happens and there's a shortage of European care workers because of that, I'm thinking, where are the people going to come from? Right? So everything I was thinking at that point in time was, well, how are we going to staff this thing? If we're going to be really successful, we need great people. How are we going to find the great people? How are we going to keep them,
And that goes back to, you actually started Visiting Angels from your kitchen table? Dining
room table. Yeah. I've got a picture somewhere, I think. I need to get it framed and stuck on wall.
Yeah, you do.
But yeah, there was I've got a picture of sort of probably September, October 2017. I've got the bank mandate documents. I've got the mapping for where we thought we were going to start.
Did it start how you thought it was going to start?
Kind of. It's a really nice thing when you've been involved in franchising. Yeah. You sort of understand that the process of starting a business can be systematized, and so you get pretty good at knowing that step first, then that bit and that bit. So I had a plan. I mean, I had a very clear plan for growth in terms of client numbers. That I was going to be I was going to have no clients for the first 4 months because I was going to be waiting for a registration with the regulator. And then it was going to be like 4 clients, 4 clients, 4 clients, 5 clients, 5 clients, 5 clients, like that. And it wasn't like that.
No, it never is. It's starting a business. It's never like
that thing in it. You're a millionaire 3 times over on a spreadsheet, right? And then what happens is reality hits, basically. So we got registered with the Care Quality Commission in January 2018. I'd been out marketing for most of the back end of 2017. I'd hit the streets quite hard, try and build some awareness of what we were trying to do. And as a result of that, we were registered, I think, something like the 16th of January. And then our first client inquiry came on 23rd. So we were waiting like a week of like, where's it going to come from? And then the phone started ringing, basically. So I had a client 3 months earlier than I thought I was going to have. And then I had no clients in my second month. And then it were like 5 clients, 9 clients, 12 clients. Bearing in mind, I'm budgeting for 4 or 5, right? So I remember my first member of staff, lady called Trey Hall. She's still with us. She's on our area team.
And did you fund all this? Sorry, did you fund all this yourself?
No. So we've got some outside investment coming to it, and ultimately the beautiful thing about the business is we're part of an international network. So the American business for Visiting Angels, and they've got 837 franchisees in 5 countries around the world. So those guys are very supportive of what we're trying to do over here, and that has enabled us to be where we are. I guess we get hands-on support from those guys. My first member of staff, Trey, who was my registered manager. I was looking at her and thinking, I told her it was going to be 4, 4, 5, 5 clients, and it's like now 9 and 12, and she's going to break unless I do something about fixing it, basically. Yeah. So the business plan said we weren't going to recruit somebody until month 8, and we're on month 6, and I'm recruiting to add a member of staff, and so I brought somebody else in, and then we blanked for a month, and I'm like, great. And then it just went from there. I think our busiest month in terms of onboarding new clients was 22 clients in a single month.
Wow.
We went from 0 to 2,000 hours of care in less than 3 years. We went from 0 to 100 staff in less than 3 years. It's a £2.2 million a year business, and we did it pretty quickly, basically. But the intention was always then that we were going to build out a network nationally through franchising. So having dealt with Brexit, having been prepped for Brexit, because I was like, right, we need a solution to this staffing problem. So the thing we try to do, I guess the thing that makes us different is that we focus on caregivers first. We call it being carer-centric. I've always said that in summer 2017, I think I was the first person on the planet to use the words carer-centric.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
because you put your people first.
Yeah, but there's no other way of doing it, genuinely. No. And I think I listen. Sometimes I listen to people try and talk around it. As a care provider, I don't provide care. My people do.
Yes.
Right. So my job is to look after the people so that the people can go out there and provide an excellent service to the clients that receive care. Right. I think that's pretty straightforward. Right.
That's how it should be within most businesses.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
I
look
think
after
so.
your people.
Well,
I'm heavily on that.
I think the thing is, otherwise, it ends up being exhausting because you've only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
I always say that time is the only resource you can't buy more of, right? So it's just that thing of like, if you run out of hours, you run out of hours. So the only way of doing it is to have people who are passionate about what you're trying to achieve and to have them go out there and do that for you, and be engaged in what you're about. So yeah, we have an inverted organizational chart for the business, like an upside down org chart, which we sort of me at the bottom as the least important person in the business. And that's cool. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And our caregivers right at the very top.
Yeah.
And it helps everybody then just to sort of see that our role is to support them.
Yeah.
My role is to support the person directly above me, and their role is to support the person above them. And it works.
I say to my team all the time, I'm just a sales rep here. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, there's a really odd thing. I guess there's a bit of a contradiction with the franchise side of our business in so much as, lots of people get into running their own business through franchising because they want to be the boss.
No.
Right? They want to set the business up. And I
hate that word, by the way.
We're looking for people who want to lead with humility.
Yes.
Right? People who want to come into the business in order to make themselves the least important person in the business. And I've always said, look, my ego's fine. I'm okay, genuinely okay being at the bottom of that. Yeah. Right? I'm working my way towards obsolescence. I figure the bigger we get, the less important I become, and eventually I won't need to be there at all.
Yeah.
Right? but it's an odd thing to then try and find franchisees that engage with that. And I think the reason that we've been pretty successful is because we have done really well at finding a group of people who want to run the business as I did and are prepared to come in and celebrate their carers and make them the most important people in the organisation.
They say, don't they? Like a lot of people say, managing people is the hardest job. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so how would you say, what have you done different in regards to what you do with your client team, and how do you, because you've gone from one member of staff to 1,400 staff, so it's how do you take the time out to make sure that everything's replicated? And
you've got to best way to describe it is you've got to share responsibility for doing that. So and again, that inverted organizational chart's the best way of understanding it, I think. So my job is to look after the people directly above me in that org chart, the people who are second less important in the organization, if that makes sense. My second in command is not quite as unimportant as I am, if that makes sense. Now, if I support people directly, I'm invalidating the people in the middle, right? My role is to support them for them to then support the people above them. So what you then get is that pretty much everybody in the organization is engaged with supporting caregivers in some way. So the people focus is not just mine, it's a shared belief of everybody in the organization.
Love that.
Now, you've then got to weed it out if you find those that aren't. Because occasionally we have people who like the idea of it but are not truly being carer-centric. So those people we have to remove from the organisation because that's not what we're about. They're not in line with what we're trying to achieve as a business. But what you end up with then is that from a brand perspective, if you think if vision and values are the sort of the manifestation of the brand that you are as an organisation, right? Then everybody within the business has got some responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And we have a situation where a caregiver working alongside another caregiver can be so pleased with the work that her colleague does that she can ring the office and tell the office to send her a thank you card. And the office will send that out on her behalf. So you've then got one caregiver thanking another caregiver. You've got a caregiver also being carer-centric, right?
Yeah.
And it is that degree of shared vision. So I guess that's some of the bits. But I think the thing for me with our sector is that we've got 132,000 vacancies in adult social care. There's a massive shortage.
Yeah, we're just going to say there's a massive shortage.
Yeah. But I think part of the reason for that is, and I think the thing that I did with the gardening league, with having a bit of distance from business to think about things strategically, was to say, well, if you describe the job of being a carer without saying the words carer, it's not attractive enough, right? It's a high stress job with irregularity in your working week for a relatively low wage. 50% of all domiciliary care workers are on a 0-hour contract. So there's not many people who want to do that. So we said, well, if we're going to do something about fixing that, we've got to address that. And I think there's some basic levers in there. There's the kind of like commercial stuff, better pay, proper contracts, stability in somebody's work week so that they're seeing the same person week in, week out. Thanking people, listening to people, engaging with a career path, allowing somebody to develop profession, all that stuff basically is really important.
Yeah.
But the sector wasn't really doing that. And so we decided that we were going to really make that an important part of what we do. So the problem then is that people hear me, people watching this and go, it's all right for you, Dan, you pay your people more, you can afford to do that. I'm like, well, but that's because I prioritize being able to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've set the standards from the get-go.
Yeah, we pay £2 to £3 an hour more than minimum wage. We use a proper contract, not a 0-hour contract. We have stability in the working week so that the client gets the same caregiver, but ultimately so the caregiver gets the same client. We have a minimum 1 hour visit.
That must be much better than just going to every person within the community.
Totally.
Because it's not that it's the emotional connection as well between the client and the carer.
Just there's a simple thing. So when I came in this morning, there's a couple of wires hanging down the outside of your building. I think the lads must be
They're
cleaning.
not ours.
No.
Before anyone says.
They're cleaning the windows, I think. But I think the way they clean the windows here is that they parascend down the building. Yeah. So
don't want anyone thinking we've got a health and safety else going on.
But I was just, I'm impressed by the fact that we're in the middle of Manchester and there's somebody climbing down a building, But what I would say from that is that a window cleaner gets the job satisfaction of standing back from a building. I mean, these lads will get the job satisfaction of not killing themselves falling off a building, right? But they'll get the
they
satisfaction.
give me a fright of life when they go past.
While waving in the window. They're going to get the satisfaction of standing back from the building and seeing a clean window.
Yes.
Right? Now, lots of care workers don't get the satisfaction of closure from their work because they're constantly rushing on to the next thing.
Yes.
So they never get to see the fulfillment of the experience of somebody being left safe, well and happy as they would like, right? So, simple thing. We do a minimum 1 hour visit, not because it's better for the client, but actually because we don't want the caregiver to have too much work to do in too little time. We want to give them that degree of closure of knowing that they've left that situation as best they can. Now, if you don't get that closure, that unfulfilled feeling, if you get that 5, 6, 8 times a week, then that creates stress for people.
Yeah.
And that again is something that contributes to people's poor work experience. So we've tried to remove that because it makes the job of being a carer easier for the carer, right? So the pay stuff's important because you can't have a conversation about a professional career if it's got a pay rate which is not appropriate for it. But actually, people stay because of the way they feel, because of the way that we engage with them, because of what we're enabling them to do, and that's a lot to do with how we work, not how we pay.
Yeah.
So that. A big lesson, I think. And I think also we figured out pretty early on that it didn't make much commercial sense to be constantly chasing a limited resource, which is what caregivers available to join an organisation are. There's not enough of them. So it made no sense to be losing loads of people and constantly trying to find replacements for those people. Yeah. It made far more sense for us to keep the people we had. So lots of the strategies that we employ are about retention.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the industry average staff turnover rate for home care workers is anywhere between 50 and 70%, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the experiences that they're having within their employment? Because, I know a couple of care workers, and they're not happy in the jobs. No. And it's like, they constantly seem like they're on the rush.
Yeah.
And they're going from, and it's like you said, which is a bit of an eye-opener, is they're not actually taking the time to get to know the client. The client can't feel safe in an environment that the door is just opening and shutting and it's different people. Yep. You'd want someone to know, the little bits about you, your life or your name or just as little things and make you, the client should be made to feel special. They're in this care for a reason.
Yep.
They need to be comfortable.
Yeah. So I think that within the home care space, I say 50% of the workforce. The workforce is like 750,000 people.
Wow.
Half of them are on a 0-hour contract. And then the industry says we've got a problem with staff retention. I'm like, well, no shit, because you're not giving any loyalty to people. Why would they extend you any loyalty back, right? So I think the contract structure is a fundamental part of it. Having proper contracts, not 0-hour contracts.
Do you think it's because people within the other companies are just seeing it as money? They just want to get the money in, so they're just chucking anyone at the job?
No, I think there are thousands of people running home care businesses across the country who are great people. Oh. They're lovely people. But I think their experience of coming into care was in a different epoch. There's been a sea change in care delivery in the last 20 years.
But you had that personal connection with it before, with what you're seeing with you now.
Yeah.
I think that'll be leading your
But I think it's also the time I had to think about what the problems were, and then the distance from the problem. I think there's a lot of people who are so close to the problem they sort of can't see a way around it. They're too busy just trying to make things happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've got to believe it can be different. You've then got to be prepared to think differently and act differently, and then you've got to be true to your values when you're doing that. And you can't give up just because you get a speed bump along the way. So I do think that 20 years ago as a sector we had fewer vacancies, there was more available people. The job itself was easier. I'll get criticism for that because it's never been an easy job to do, but the job we do now is far more complex than it was 10 or 15 years ago because the pressures on the NHS and what's happening with an aging population means that the work that my teams are now doing is far more like nursing work than it ever used to be, How
did you guys get on in the COVID pandemic?
It wasn't fun.
No, I can't imagine it was.
Find me somebody that had a nice pandemic, we were sort of right in the eye of the storm of it, such that, we had rounds that we were doing, which were COVID positive rounds. So we were discharging patients from home, from hospital to home, who we knew were COVID positive. We had caregivers that were going in to support them, knowing that this person had COVID. And we had to put them in a safe round. You couldn't have a COVID positive and next to a COVID negative. So it was COVID positive patient, COVID. And then at the end of the day, the caregiver would go home and bless them, they were literally getting changed in their kitchen, putting their clothes in the dish, in the washing machine, before they could even hug the kids, because we didn't know what it was, right? We now know what it was. We've all the vaccines. We had all of that stuff basically then. It was a challenging time. I mean, I think there was a light at the end of the tunnel for the care sector at the time, because Thursday nights we were standing outside our houses and clapping for carers, and I think lots of people in our sector took heart from the appreciation that was showed from society towards what they were doing at that point in time. Unfortunately, we're back to normal, for whatever normal looks like now, and everyone's not celebrating carers in the same way. And as a result of that, we've sort of drifted back down the public consciousness's priorities a little bit on that. But I think it was difficult. It allowed us to show what we could do well. I mean, as an organisation, we were discharging people inside an average of 16 hours during that. So we get a phone call from a hospital, and we'd be getting somebody home next day. My team were working 7 days a week. They were working on rotation to ensure we could always respond to what was needed. We had to focus an awful lot on infection control, but we were trained to be able to do that, so that was relatively easier for us to do that. But it was difficult. I remember fighting to get PPE and then making visors. I found a production company in Rotherham that were making the raw materials. We literally sat there and just built these visor things, So you just sort of found a way of making it all work the way it needed to.
Wow. I can imagine how you must have. Well, I can't imagine how you must have been feeling in all that.
But as I say, no one had a good plan. I get a bit grumpy sometimes because I remember having conversations with lawyers at the time, and the lawyers were telling me they were a bit sad because they'd had to stay in their house. And I'm like, anyway, you've got half an acre on the back and you've got quite a nice house, so. No one's having a good pandemic, but yours is all right. And I think just that thing of it was you just have to make do, because the reality is that the people we were supporting needed us, and had we not been able to go, then they can't get out of bed, they can't eat, they can't, the medication, all the stuff that we were supporting with was essential, So we had to carry on as business as usual, even though it very definitely wasn't usual,
Yeah.
But you learn from it. It's one for the book, I think. I'll stick it in the book then.
100%. Are you going to write a book, Dan? I think you should.
Yeah, I might.
Going back to you starting at your table to now having 72 offices up and down the UK, which you are on track, or you are going to be creating 540 offices up and down the Europe.
Yeah, we're going into Europe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from you starting at your kitchen table, did you think that you were going to grow this big? Because you're over in Ireland as well now, aren't you? And in talks with Germany.
Yeah. So, we there was always a plan to have lots of locations. It happened relatively quickly, and COVID had something to do with that as well. By the way, I mean we went into lockdown number 1 of the pandemic in March 2020. We had 3 active locations. We had Hertfordshire, my Sheffield office, and West London, and so. And then the pandemic hits, and the banks weren't lending, and it became difficult. Most of the people that we find to become a franchisee were coming to us through going to events like exhibitions, and they weren't happening because COVID had stopped. I did an exhibition in February 2020, And there were literally 3 people in the room. It was crazy. The spookiest experience I've ever had at the NEC, because there was nobody else there, right?
Just 3 people?
Literally, it felt like 3 people. There were a few more than that, right? But it's just that thing of like, so the world stopped, but the business had an overwhelming demand because society needed what we did. So we had to sort of find a way. We were helping people find alternative ways of funding and getting started, just so that we could grow the way that we needed to. So yeah, we went sort of through that. We opened 21 last year, which is the reason I've got more grey hair now than I used to have, because you have to move quite quick to do that stuff.
And are these just offices up and down the UK at the moment?
Yeah. So yeah, our furthest south is in Bournemouth, or we're just talking about Bude in Cornwall. That's probably a little bit further south. And then we go right the way up to Stirlingshire in Scotland. We've got Edinburgh, Stirling and Glasgow open in Scotland as well. And I think the harder challenge from that has been finding a support team to help me to do that, right? Because this is a team game, and that's
franchise. What made you go with them? Don't want me asking.
I guess when you've had a lot of time in franchising, there are people that you want to do business with, and sometimes people you don't want to do business with. And as a business in the US, Visiting Angels is huge. They're market leader in the US, and their senior leadership team are just amazing people. The chief exec, Larry, the guy that started the business and who owns it.
Are they carer-centric as well?
They are very much people-focused. I look at it and say, look, I went, one of the first things I did, sort of springtime 2017, I flew out for dinner with Larry Meggs, who's the guy that founded the business, and with Dave Rittling, who's the VP for International Development. We went out for dinner. And the rules for dinner were we weren't going to talk shop. So we weren't going to talk about franchising. We weren't going to talk about care. So we talked about politics and religion.
And did you stick to it?
All the other, all the stuff you're not supposed to talk about, small talk. We talked about it. But from my perspective, I wanted to understand who I was going to be working with, basically.
Yes.
And they're lovely. They're not only are they lovely people, it's a bit of a unicorn organisation, because it's the world's second largest private duty care provider, and it's 100% owned by Larry Meggs. It's not corporate financed. It's not VC owned. There's none of that nonsense going on behind it, basically. And if I look at Larry's senior leadership team, people like Dave or Rich Bittner, who's the VP for marketing, they've worked with Larry for 20 plus years. Now, you don't get organisations like that. So I'm like, this is great, basically. And then...
So how did you get in? Did you just reach out to them and just...
Yeah, well, now that we were talking, so a friend had recommended, a guy I owe a beer to, had recommended we have a conversation, basically. And so we were talking about the feasibility of it, probably 6 or 8 months earlier than actually starting. And then I was very well involved with some work I was doing with ProMedica, and I didn't want to leave them in the lurch, but I wanted to close that project out before I then thought about what else I was going to do, basically. So it just ended up, the timing ended up being wrong then, but right later. And then, as I say, the thing of being able to work with an organization that not only celebrates its people in the way that I wanted to, but also has a culture of learning within it, which means that we were able to benefit from stuff that had happened in America. And I think there's in franchising, it's really interesting. There's a sometimes in franchising, try as hard as you might as a franchisor, you get a bit of protectionism going on from franchisees. They sort of want to keep to themselves the things that they're doing, which are making them successful. And what I found very early on with Visiting Angels is that there's a culture of sharing with the business. So they have a thing called a best practice competition they run every year.
Oh, I love that.
And that's from franchisees from around the world sharing their ideas for how to be successful.
Yeah.
So very early on, I'm looking through previous entries for the best practice competition. This is 2017, 2018. I'm looking at stuff that was done in 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
Ideas that franchisees in America had about how to retain more staff. So I've been able to sort of take all of that. We had our good ideas, we had their good ideas as well. And that very much has turbocharged the growth that we've had over here, because it's a combination of both. But I think that the harder thing over here has been finding people for my leadership team in the UK who, as basically as bonkers as I am, who was daft enough as I was to think there's a different way of doing this.
I don't think you're bonkers. I feel like you've got the right morals.
Yeah. there's sometimes a little bit of sort of when you're in a room and you're the only one saying what you're saying, you feel a bit like you're howling at the moon a little bit. You know what I mean? But I think, so the harder thing then, as I say, when you then start recruiting from a sector, and I came into it, and I've been accused of being aggressive about it, but I think the reality is that we believed that our way of working was the right way of working, passionately believed it. And that as a result of that, we believed that things needed to change from where they had been, that the status quo was not working. So people who work for our competitors, right, are probably thinking the way that their businesses want them to think, not the way that I want them to think. So you've sort of got, you can't recruit somebody based on their aptitude. You've got to look at their attitude, and is their attitude a good match for what you stand for as an organization? So we got pretty good very quickly at sort of when someone's paying lip service to being carer-centric, we can tell quite quickly. We're looking for those people that genuinely do believe in what we stand for as an organization. Yeah. And so I think as we built that team out, I've got 11 now working on franchise support with me as to help our franchisees, basically. And we found people who are passionate about trying to challenge the received wisdom. Like we're a network of iconoclasts. We're trying to rip it up and start again because we believe that things need to change, basically, that caregivers' work experience needs to be the sole focus of the organisation.
Well, I feel like you guys, you lead a lot different in regards to what you do put on for your team members as well, which leads me on to...
what do you want to talk about now? Festivals or...
we're just going to go into... So you do festivals for your carers?
Yeah, we do,
And then is it Carers Got Talent?
We did Home Care's Got Talent as well.
Yeah. What else is going on behind the scenes here?
Oh, there's a load of other bits we work. I can't tell you them. They're for later. But I think what's interesting is that if you start... Second part of our mission statement is to redefine the role of carers in society, right? And that's about us saying we know that caregivers are amazing. And so when society underestimates the degree to which carers are amazing, they need to have it pointed out to them really clearly. So Home Care's Got Talent was a great way of doing that. I
absolutely loved this.
Yeah, it was good fun to do.
Yeah. Did they enjoy it?
They loved it.
Yeah.
I think it was really interesting when we were doing the final edit, because we shot about 3 hours worth of content, and it was edited down to a 90-minute TV program, basically, which has had over 200,000 views on YouTube now.
I can imagine.
But
you need to snip that up and get it on your socials as well.
That's a tip. We need to do some of that. Yeah. What I would say with it is that people were still saying to me, "Oh, low-skilled workers, carers are low-skilled workers," and I'm like, nonsense. I'm not having any of that. So one of the people who was in Home Care's Got Talent was that she's a fantastic opera singer, but she's also able to change a stoma bag. And I'm like, you tell me that lady's not super talented, right? That she can professionally do that, but also, by the way, she's an opera singer, So we had dancers, we had singers, we had a comedy act, we had band twirlers.
Wow.
We had a really lovely cross-section. But so the idea was...
And who come up with that idea? Was that you?
Yeah.
Your crazy ways.
Yeah.
Here he is again.
So because I've got a 4-year-old in our house, so I don't get to enjoy a bath, basically. So I was on my way down to London for a meeting. I was staying in a little B&B just off the A1, and it was with a bath. So I'm laying there in the bath on a Saturday night, listening to Michael McIntyre's Saturday Night Takeaway. I'm thinking, we could do a talent contest. We should do a talent contest. Let's do that. We should do that. And then the more people I talked about it, no one was saying that's a stupid idea. Don't do it. So I thought, well, all right, let's have a go on it. So we offered it to the sector as a whole, and we got 13 national care businesses got involved in it.
Wow.
We offered about 50,000 carers the chance to enter. We had about 50 that did. We had 30 at semi-finals, which we did in Manchester and London.
And what did you host an event somewhere?
So we had, literally, it was like people rocking up to audition. So there was a semi-final audition. And then the grand final was at a theatre in York, and we sold it out. We had 300 people in a theatre to watch it. Yeah. And it's interesting. There's two things I took away from it being lovely things. So firstly was when we were editing the video down, the clips that we took with carers when they walked off stage, we interviewed them straight off stage.
Oh, I love that.
And we had Matt Jameson as one of the guys doing it. He was on Married at First Sight. So he's great. He's really good. So the feedback from them the second they walked off stage was beautiful, because you had that combination of the adrenaline, which was still going, and then the relief that they'd finished, but the joy of having performed like that to a full audience, right? So that was number one. I'd do it again just for that, because it was such a buzz to get that.
You should do that yearly.
We are.
Yes.
But
could I come and watch the finals?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and then the other thing was a really big thing was that's one thing. And then in the theatre itself, there was a load of people there who were there because they were supporting someone that was performing, right?
Yeah.
Or they were from one of the brands that were involved in it. So if you want, they've got a vested interest. They've got a reason to be there and a reason to enjoy themselves. But about half the audience were people from York who just bought a ticket for a night out. And then when you're looking at a theatre full of people and they're on their feet and they're clapping and they're singing, I'm like, so these punters who didn't have to be entertained are actually entertained as well. We've done a good thing here, you know?
Yeah.
So that was good fun. So the talent contest we are doing again.
Is that this year?
It is, yeah. So finals on the 14th of August in Birmingham.
Okay.
And semi-finals are in July.
Can people buy tickets for this?
Yeah.
Yes, people get your tickets in. So, I know that we will.
homecaresgottalent.co.uk is the web address. And then the other thing, I think the other thing that the festival. My missus accused me of being a low rent Simon Cowell because I've got I do music festivals and I do a talent contest. I'll take that. If I'm a pound behind Simon Cowell, I'm doing all right.
Hustle.
Yeah, that's what it is. I've always done we've done a lot of family events. Because when a carer's caring, they're not being a mum, they're not being a sister. So we try and bring people together.
I love that.
So we've always had Christmas parties. We have Easter egg hunts. We have a fireworks party every year. And then we had this summer barbecue. And to start with, and when I first started, it was me on a bit of grass in front of the office with a barbecue, trying not to give people food poisoning when I was burning sausages, all that stuff, basically. And then we grew, and it sort of grew legs. And so we came out of the pandemic, having not been able to do it for a couple of years. Thought, right, I'm going to have a proper go at this then. So we did our first music festival. Called it Carefest. So anybody that works in care can come to Carefest for free. And they will eat and drink for free.
Oh, wow.
And then we have buckets and the food stalls which sell food to members of the public who come along. That generates money for charity. So we raise a bit of money for charity as well. But we had some live bands on, we did that. And then the year after it was a bit bigger, and the year after it was a bit bigger again. And then last year when we did it, the main stage was sponsored by a local radio station. It was live broadcast on Rother Radio for the entire day. We had Sonia off of the 1980s, 1990s, a Liverpudlian singer who was part of the Stock Aitken and Waterman stable. She had #1 records. She came along, she performed. And then we had 4 or 5 live bands. It was just fantastic. We had about 600 people come.
Where was that?
That was in Sheffield. It was on Bank Holiday Monday, summer bank holiday. And it's exactly the same again this year.
Oh, wow.
So we're on an estate where the office is, where there's a bit of green space around it. And I just sort of take the estate over for the day, basically.
I love that.
So we build the main stage.
And do people come from up and down the country?
Yeah, people travel from distance too. Yeah, but most of the people there are from within health and social care in South Yorkshire. Yeah. But, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, and I distinctly remember watching like Live Aid when I was a lad, that simulcast from Wembley and also from LA. And I'm like, in my head, I quite like the idea of the fact that eventually Carefest is going to be going on the South Coast in the UK. And we'll have a stage in Blackpool and we'll have a stage in Sheffield, and we'll see what we can do with that. But
that's fantastic.
It's a lovely thing to do. But the principal reason we do it is to bring the caregivers together, give them a chance to come together with the families, and just so we can tell everybody how much we appreciate what people do. Because, you know, if you're going to be out at night working with a client to help that client go to bed, you're not putting your own kids to bed. And, you know, we need to let the family know that we appreciate that sacrifice. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing.
So, yeah, stuff like that, where we look at things, I think, slightly differently. You know?
Yeah. But it's like you said, you're carer-centric and you're putting them carers first, because I don't know any other care homes or care agencies that do any of that.
No, I think it's interesting. I've always been very vocal and quite public about what we do. And I think some people look at what we do and say, well, we can't copy that. It's impossible for us to copy that. And I'm like, well, you know, actually not everything that we do is a money related thing.
Yeah.
But then there are some organizations who are really trying to do some of this stuff, but their structures get in the way of it. You know, the hierarchy don't believe in it, or it's not part of their vision. And I genuinely believe that if you make it your vision and you make it your mission, it's got to run through everything you do as an organization. It even falls into your brand values. So everything about the business is structured around that, you know. And I guess I was able to do that because we had a blank sheet of paper. And when I started the business, I spent some of the 6 months gardening leave looking at the market.
You've seen it as an insider really with your nan as well.
Yeah, totally.
And that would have had a massive, massive impact on you. And then for you to visually see that and happen personally to you, and then go and do your research and everything, I feel like that has done you the world of good.
Yeah, I think it is that thing sometimes of sort of, you know, I looked at nearly 50 businesses when I was doing the market due diligence on it. And if they had a mission at all, it was a mission focused on clients and care delivery, right? They wanted to be an outstanding care provider. They wanted to be the care provider of choice. And I'm like, well, I get all of that, but you're not going to get to that unless you're looking after your people. And nobody that I looked at that I found had a people-focused mission statement. So I thought, well, that's bonkers, because that's the biggest problem we've all got. So either when you focus on your people, it doesn't work, or nobody's had that idea yet. And thankfully, it was the latter. But yeah, we do view the world of working in care slightly differently. And I think, part of, especially over the last couple of years, part of the opportunity that's afforded us has been to, spent time talking to politicians and trying to influence government. We've spent time talking to media outlets, and I've been on Breakfast TV, I've been on BBC News 24. We've done all that stuff basically because we have got a sort of counterculture narrative about the business. But I do genuinely wish sometimes that some providers who are in our market would look at what we do and go, well, just copy Visiting Angels then.
Yeah.
They're doing all right with it.
Do you not think some people will? Well, they will do. Of course they will.
I do hope so. Yeah. And again, just going back again to when I joined home instead, Trevor Brocklebank. One of the things I loved about Trevor as a chief exec was he was always very much of the opinion that there's room for 2 or 3 good providers in every market.
Yeah.
So this isn't a competitive thing.
It's not that. Imagine if they could team up with you and then they come on the festivals and stuff like that.
And to be fair, Home Care's Got Talent is that. That's absolutely a team game. And it's great to have so many people involved in recognising that their people are awesome and wanting to celebrate it. Really genuinely is. And I think, we're not going to fix that unless lots and lots of providers are constant with that message. I genuinely think that there are some of those that look at the bits that we do and they view it competitively. Visiting Angels are trying to take carers from us. They're missing the point. The point of this is that the demand that we have as a society is not going to be met by the workforce that currently works in social care. It's impossible to fix it with the people who are currently working in social care. There's 1.6 million people working in social care. Okay, the only way of fixing it is to make the rest of the workforce. The rest of the workforce, by the way, is 28 million people. That's everybody who working age that doesn't currently work in care. Think that they might be able to do it. Yeah. Those that used to work in care but left the sector because they were burnt by it might come back if their experience of working in care was different. Right? And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to broaden the appeal of the care sector so that people who haven't thought about caring previously can come into it. I'll give you a really clear example. Our longest serving client in Sheffield has been with us since April 2018. Okay. So in that time, all of that time, 90% of her visits have been delivered by one lady.
Oh, wow.
Her caregiver. Right?
Oh,
her caregiver.
I feel like family.
Exactly that. Her caregiver is supported by a couple of other people to cover for sicknesses and holidays and days off and stuff like that, right? But Claire has done the majority of her visits. Now, prior to working with us, Claire used to work on the counter in a pharmacy. She wasn't a career care person, right? And I think, and that for me is what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of say, look, there are awesome people. You less so now when you go through a supermarket because now there's an unexpected item in the bagging area. Now they don't want you talking to a human being, right? When you go through a supermarket and you've got that amazing person on the checkout who's just chatty and lovely, and I'm like, they would make great carers if the care sector wasn't asking them to do an impossible job. Too much work in too little time for a minimum wage, right? So if you change the rules of engagement on that and you elevate the attractiveness of the job, it becomes easy to find people that are prepared to do that, So I do hope that some people will look at that and go, wow, there's enough there that we can think about doing some of those bits.
I definitely think people will be looking at you and starting to say, no, that's for sure. Whereas you're going to have out care staff.
But it is just that thing of it's the only way. It's the only way. It's genuinely the only way. 132,000 vacancies currently in adult social care. And the thing is, the demand for the service that we're providing is increasing year on year. Yeah. Population's getting older and older. So the only way of dealing with this is to find more people that are prepared to do it. So we changed the rules of engagement a little bit, and that's helped us a little bit to do that.
I think you're doing amazing.
Thank you.
And what's going to be next for Dan Archer?
Well, we're off back to Germany again in November. Yeah. So we continue the sort of the European bit.
That's exciting.
You're
not playing games, are you, Dan?
We do play a lot of games. But we're quite serious about what we're trying to do. And I think there's if you look around Europe, there's a consistency in the problems we face in the UK with other European countries, right? So there are shortages of care staff in other European countries, and it's predominantly because the thing that's leading to the aging population in the UK is population dynamics. It's society changing. It's not people living longer anymore. The average age is actually sort of pretty much plateaued. The reason we've got lots more elderly people now is there are just more people in that group of society. You know, the baby boomer demographic is coming to a point where they're needing care. And by definition, it was a population explosion, right? And the significant thing about that, and that's the case for Germany, it's the case for Holland, it's the case for lots of places like that, where you've got this large cohort of people that are going to be needing care in the next 5 to 10 years, is that because it's a population bubble, the generation following it, which is my generation, is smaller. Right. So you've got fewer sons and daughters to care for the larger numbers of mums and dads that need it. So, we've done a bit of research on where else we might be able to move to. So we've got a couple of identified locations in Europe that we could move into. But we continue growing in the UK as well. I mean, we've had I think 8 offices that we've put through go live process first part of this year, and we're only middle of February now. So it's been a busy start to this year as well.
I think you're a man that likes to keep busy.
Which I think it's interesting again, where we come back to the pandemic and you talk about running a home care business during the pandemic. I mean, it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So compared to where we were there.
You've not slowed down since then.
No, I feel like I have though. I genuinely feel like we're taking it a bit easier now because it's just not as stressful as that, you know?
Yeah.
It's nice to start to see other people understand it.
Yeah.
I think there was a long period of time where I felt like I was howling at the moon because it was literally only crazy Dan talking about this stuff. And I really clearly remember when I'd finished the feasibility on it, there was a guy that I knew through Care. He was a consultant. I took him out for a bite to eat and just showed him what we were thinking about doing. And he said to me, look, your care-centric things are a fantastic USP for you as an employer, but what's your USP for a client? And I said to him, you don't get it, do you? You've never bought care, mate. Because actually, when we talk to client families, overwhelmingly it's the eldest daughter of the family, because men are not good at this stuff, right? So you're talking to the eldest daughter of the family, that person does not want a disengaged carer working with mom. They want a professionally qualified, motivated, engaged, consistent face, right? So actually being carer-centric delivers value to your client experience there as well. It's the same USP. And he couldn't wrap his head around it. And I'm like, well, you know, we'll have a go. Yeah. If I fail, you were right. It was the way we took on it, you know. We've gone past that now to people do actually understand, I think, a bit more about what it means. But I think, you know, because of the challenges that we're facing as a society, the more people that can engage with it, the better.
Yeah. You know? I genuinely think if people followed your way of how you're doing things, a lot more people will be happier. That's for sure.
Yeah. There's a simple thing. I come back to my nan. So my nan used to say she only knew she was getting care when the blue tabard showed up. For her,
that's sad.
And indeed for a lot of people, the uniform that the carer wears becomes the constant in the relationship, right? The uniform is the proxy for the relationship that should really exist between the client and the carer, okay? So we thought, well, we don't need that because we've got the same person coming in, week out. So within reason, it doesn't really matter what that carer's wearing, actually. Yeah. So we have undercover carers, plainclothes carers. Now, when you do that, what happens is the client will say, well, I might want to go and do something in society then. Right? I can now go to the shops with my carer. I can now go to the theatre. Yeah. I can now go to the football with my carer because I'm not having somebody stood next to me wearing a uniform, which is the equivalent of carrying a big sign that says I need care, right?
Yes.
And I think the uniform, I don't know why there is a uniform for care businesses. There is no practical reason for there to be a uniform because we wear PPE to protect the clothing, so we don't need the uniform. And the uniform is a barrier to maintaining independence. And what we're supposed to be about as a care provider is maintaining independence, right? Yeah. But if you watch, and I've stood next to it and watched it happen in a coffee shop, you watch somebody come into a coffee shop, client and carer, carer's wearing a uniform, and the person behind the counter in the coffee shop talks to the uniform. Yeah. Does he take sugar in his tea? You get that thing going on, which takes away independence, right? And I'm like, well, we don't get that because the consistency in the team means that the caregiver doesn't need a uniform. And then there's the other thing, again, absolutely, I get on my soapbox about it, is choice, because it's really important that people are able to choose who they invite into their home, not just be presented with the carer that they're going to get, but to actively be able to select who their carer is. Now, we're the only care provider to offer that choice. We call it Choose Your Caregiver. It literally is like a beauty parade for caregivers, where the family get to meet the people we think might be a good match.
To see who's compatible.
And you absolutely spend a bit of time, have a coffee and a chat, just be comfortable, just to make sure that you're happy with that person. And if you're not happy, we'll bring somebody else along.
Love that.
Now, I think that's a really basic thing, because in the care sector, we talk a lot about choice. And yes, there are lots of choices. There's a choice on what someone wears and what someone eats, and what colour cardigan and where we go today and what do you want on your toast for breakfast. Those are all important choices, but the choice of who you invite into your home is the most basic choice. And lots of people aren't able to advocate for what they want in that respect. I've always said, if there's two people in a bathroom and one of them's naked, it's bloody awkward unless you know each other. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of how it is.
Of course it is, yeah.
So we are able to do that. We're able to provide that choice, because when you retain, as we do, 90+% of our staff, we've got a staff retention rate nationally of 92%. So we only lose 8% of our staff nationally. Wow. We can offer that choice because we know there's a 92% chance that caregiver is going to be there next week and the week after. Or in the case of my longest serving client, 6 years later, right? It's only possible to do that because if you retain your people, you can give that consistency and continuity of care to your clients, So again, that comes back to being carer-centric, delivering an advantage to the client that's paying for the service that we provide,
Well, you're definitely doing something right, Dan.
Thank you. I think it's just, that thing about what you do differently, And I've done a lot of panels and sort of like you go and do keynotes for people and stuff like that. And I'm like, I've been sat on a panel next to somebody, and I introduce the business the way I always do, the way we've talked about it today, putting carers first and being carer-centric and da-da-da-da-da. And I will say, look, we actively say to anybody that will listen, our carers are the most important people in the business. Yeah. And the person sat next to me said, I'm from X company. And we believe that our carers are just as important, and literally the word stuck in her throat. She couldn't bring herself to say it. And I'm like, the problem is if you can't say it, your actions are not going to match.
Honestly, what? You should be like, you should reflect and see how well you've done with this, because you have literally gone back to, you've stripped it all down, seen where it's gone wrong, or you've experienced it. And like the things that you put into place and the amount that you care about your team is just phenomenal. Thank you for coming on, Dan.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. It's been lovely.